Lord's Prayer together. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Glory to the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and honor to ages. Amen. The Lord Jesus Christ, God, bless this gathering. Nourish all those here present. Bless the food that's prepared for us, and nourish these people to continue the struggle for justice in the workplace. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, now and ever into ages of ages. Amen. Amen.
I want to thank the ladies this morning that put together the program that they did. And you all need to know that with the COVID striking right in the middle of this, and my friend Carson Bruning, who is fit to be here to have a display of 1800s mining tools up until the early 1960s, he got COVID too, so trying to pull a program together during a COVID outbreak in western Pennsylvania turned out to be a real learning curve. But I wanted to thank the ladies. Like I said, there was Kip Dawson, Steffi Dumike, Amy Niehaus for their outstanding work. And to put a program like this together takes a lot of people. I mean, we had Harriet, who was over at her place in Greensburg, right? Outside of Greensburg. Her and Melanie on the phone, back and forth, trying to put together an outline of the program and getting mailings out to local unions and stuff. Larry McCullough, who put together an outstanding program for the press, for press coverage for this. And Charlie McCollister, wherever his at, there he is, standing up already, waiting for applause. Charlie and I spent every night, I guess for the past month or two, on the phone saying, okay, we need to do this, we need to do that, this isn't going to work, and trying to move things together. It was a yeoman's job, and there was a lot of hands on deck. The president of the Pennsylvania Labor History Society, the president of the Battle of Homestead Society, I called them up, and it was, okay, this is what you need. If that's what you need, you got it. And it was taken care of. It was, like I said, it was just all hands on deck, and it worked out really well. And I want to give all these people that I haven't mentioned and those I have mentioned a hand. Thank you. Excuse me? I also want to say that there's a dinner bucket sitting down there on the end of one of the tables, and the young lady that did all the cooking has actually 4 jobs. She works in a rehabilitation center. She works here as a bartender part-time at I believe she told me that the VFW part-time. And she has another part-time job, I can't remember what it was right now, but she's working 4 part-time jobs, plus a full-time job. So if you would, please be generous and give her a tip.
She needs a union.
And by the way, that is my old dinner bucket there. So, so anyhow, and I wanted to introduce somebody that I think is an asset to this community. And that's the president of this club, who's been holding this club together now for I don't know how many years. 23 years. And this is the second time we've been into this community as the Pennsylvania Labor History Society and the Battle of Homestead Society. And this is the first time I get to introduce Sterling to you ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to let Sterling say a few words to you all. Sterling?
Let's see if I can get the right side of the mic. Did I?
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good.
My name's Sterling Maystorovich. I'm the president of Slovak Educational Society, the club. And today you're in a building called that used to not be the club originally. Our original club was a plank building that was built back in 1902. And over the years, it became inefficient, even with an old coal furnace, which fired the building. And they eventually, in 1950, moved into this building. This building was originally the Jednota Society, which was the Slovak, and Nick just filled me in that it was called the Unity Insurance Company, or the Jednota. And the Jednota outgrew the building about 1950, and they moved to Lancaster. And they've since branched out. They have 2 locations. They have one in Ohio and they have one in Michigan. That's about all I really know about the Jednota, other than that I do have some policies for the Slovaks at my house in case they want to buy one, but nobody's really pushing that, you know what I mean? Today, if you wish to tour our museum, we have a cultural museum on the 2nd floor of our building. It's not the biggest museum, like the Jednota has an entire building. However, we do have some artifacts from the churches, from the mining community here in Windber, and also some traditional garb and Slovak society stuff, you know what I mean? We have some clothing, we have money, we have whatever you want to see. There's in fact, we have a chart upstairs of all the family crests from Slovakia. It's pretty interesting just to see all that stuff. Joe Elias originally started that museum way back in the day, and he gave me several tours of it and tried to teach me as much as he could. But in the course of teaching me, he passed away. Not really much else to tell you. I get kind of emotional about that because Joe was really knowledgeable. And I used to love him because he used to talk with his hands, sort of like what I'm doing right now. But when he would talk with his hands were always up in the air. You know, it'd be like, yeah. You don't understand. But it was funny. I mean, growing up around the Slovak Club and being part Slovak has really been really interesting over the years, and I really appreciate the fact, and that's why I've tried to help stay in office and make sure the club doesn't close. Because there's too many people that, you know, they'd love to just sell the building, sell the assets, and try to split the money, and they think they're going to get really big money, but when you sit down and you figure out all of the membership and how it would be split, they'd really make maybe $1.20, something like that, you know what I mean? It's ridiculous. I'm not going to take any more of your time, but I am very glad to see the attendance here today. It is fantastic. I really never anticipated this many people, and I think it's awesome. I'm very, very glad for your society and the committees that you have working for you. They are great people. And as far as the club, like I said, I'll be open up to anybody that wants to tour the museum. Okay, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Stan. Really appreciate it. This is somewhat like open mic because this is important. A really good friend of ours passed away, and Jan wanted to say a few words about her.
Kenny's going to hold the microphone for me.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Oh, you're going to do it? Okay, good. Hi, my name is Jan Lohmann. I'm from northeastern Pennsylvania, and I'm out of the Communications Workers of America. Unlike Jim Young, I do have an ancestor that was in the coal mines. It was my great-grandfather, and I was able to get his name on the Miners Memorial in downtown Wilkes-Barre on Public Square. There are about a couple hundred names of anybody that worked in the mines. They didn't have to be miners, but anything to do with the mines. However, I'm here to talk about our dear friend Lois Hartel. Lois passed away a few months ago in Florida, where she moved after retiring from the ILGWU. She requested no memorial service or obituary, so this is kind of serving to let people know and spread the word. If anybody you know that knew her, I'd appreciate you letting them know. There's no official notice in the paper. I met Lois at the Greater Wilkes-Barre Labor Council union counseling classes in the late 1970s. We became friends when we both became big sisters in the Big Brothers Big Sisters program. As time went by, we became involved in many AFL-CIO union activities together. Pennsylvania Labor History Society members will remember her dedication to our group, serving as treasurer for many years. Lois was also secretary-treasurer for the Greater Wilkes-Barre Labor Council. Lois received the Joseph Byrne National United Way Award for all her community service to many organizations. She was also a member of the Pennsylvania State Women's Commission. She used her savings to start the Women's Resource Center in Scranton. Lois was a friend, mentor, and generous to all.
Thank you. For those of you who've never met Lois Hartel, you've missed an outstanding person and that I've met in my life. She was about this tall and weighed maybe 50 pounds soaking wet, and she was one heck of a hellraiser. But anyhow, thank you for that, Jan. Right now, is Elizabeth Ricketts here? Oh, Elizabeth, I didn't see you come in. I was hoping you were here. Elizabeth is going to talk to us about John Brophy. John Brophy was the president of District 2 at one time, and it's kind of like my personal hero, and I believe that Mrs. Ricketts is going to go through and explain exactly who John Brophy was. With that, I want to hand the mic over to you.
Hey everyone, really happy to be here and really grateful for all of the work that all of you guys do. I teach history at IUP, and my specialization is working class history, and my writing is mostly about the coal mine communities in District 2. I don't have any coal miners in my family. I came out of this from a purely intellectual background. I was at Emory and trolling through the library as you used to be able to do. And I came across a little book called A Miner's Life and sat down, and I think I read that whole thing in one sitting and fell in love with John Brophy and said to my advisor, I want to write my dissertation about this district and about this man. So that's what I did. And you know, I came as an outsider, and I just found every coal miner I could find and talked to them about their experiences and tried to make sure that every word I wrote, somebody authentic read it and said, yes, that's right. Did a lot of digging, sometimes didn't write things that people kind of wanted to hear, but always tried to let history do the talking. And so Charlie asked me if I would talk a little bit about John Brophy and his programs of worker education. John Brophy was born in England. His parents are Irish, very loyal Irish, very interested in Irish politics and in British politics. They came to the United States to try to find a better life for their children. When John Brophy was 8, he had just completed 3rd grade in Catholic school, and that was about the end of his really formal education. They moved around a lot in Indiana and Cambria counties looking for work in the mines, and so John was able to go to school a couple of months here and a couple of months there. But when he entered the mines at the age of 12, that was it, formal education. But John Brophy is considered a labor intellectual in the United States. He's completely self-educated. He loved to read. He would read anything he could get his hands on. And in those days, a lot of stuff, newspapers would come in on trains, and they would circulate through the entire community. And Brophy would read everything there was to read. And there were a lot of labor papers at the time. He especially liked the Pennsylvania Grit, which was about labor and had a special section about coal mining. But he read that faithfully, read many other newspapers faithfully. His mother was a housekeeper, and she would bring magazines and books home from her job. After he went to work, he would save his money. He still lived at home with his parents. And he saved his money, and he would buy books from the Sears Roebuck catalog. And his mother would save soap box tops. There you go. Because you could turn in those soap box tops for books. So he liked the big ones, like Dickens, that's a lot of words. Lasted longer. Dickens, Shakespeare, Socrates, whatever he could get his hands on, and standard histories. Then he was always very active in the Union, and he managed to get himself blacklisted around 1910. And he went to Michigan, where he worked near Detroit, and had access to real libraries and to the debating societies that were very popular at the time. He met Daniel de Leon and his son Solon, and they were socialists. He was not really into their left-leaning socialism, but he loved listening to them and reading all the things that they recommended. He got to go to the Mine Workers Convention. That was the last one that John Mitchell attended, and he was so really enthralled with being able to see John Mitchell. And so he read a lot. He went to the debating societies. He started reading economics, political theory, and really became incredibly educated through his own efforts. And he talked about how hard it was after a day's work in the mines to do any reading, but he said that is the really good thing about strikes. I get a lot of reading done. So they're not all bad. Anyway, he came back to District 2 in 1914, and in 1916, he was elected president of the district. He would have been about, I think, 31 at the time, and was just incredibly dynamic. He so cared about people. And that's just an important thing to know about Brophy. He was a very highly educated but modest man, and he cared about individual people, whoever they were. So there were problems going on at the time. Mining was very, a lot of overcapacity in mining. We had far more mines than we had demand for coal. And so that was a problem that World War I solved temporarily, but it actually made the problem worse because many people opened new mines. And so when the demand of war ended, then people were really in trouble. And overcapacity was about 100%, and miners were working about 2 to 3 days a week, and by the time we get to the mid-20s, it's often 2 to 3 days a month. And so you can imagine how hard it is to maintain the union and union solidarity in that kind of an environment. So Brophy began right away, as soon as he became president of the union, he began educational programs because he believed in the intelligence of the working class. And he believed that the working class should be the first class in society. These were the people who created all wealth, and these should be the people who made the decisions about economics and about society. And as far as he was concerned, the only reason that workers were not in better positions was because they were being denied education. They were being kept ignorant on purpose. And as an ignorant population, in that they didn't have very much education, and what they did tended to be, the teachers are hired by the companies and they teach the company line to their students. So he was very concerned about that. So he went around the district setting up educational classes, talking at union meetings, talking about basically the economics of the industry and what needed to be done. So at this time, the rank and file of the United Mine Workers nationally was very interested in nationalization of the mines. This was going on in England. They were very interested in it. They felt like this was a way to rationalize the mining industry. And coming out of World War I, the government had taken over the mines and the railroads, and they actually liked working under government control. They had increased safety, they had steadier work, of course a lot of that was because of the war, and they just felt it was a more democratic place for them to be. So they supported it a lot. In 1920, John L. Lewis became president of the United Mine Workers. John L. Lewis was a business unionist, and that was gaining a lot of popularity. And this is a pivotal moment in labor history, really, where people are having to decide if they're going to be business unionists or more progressive unionists. John L. Lewis was a business unionist. The man was very conservative. I know he has a reputation of being very militant. He knew how to talk. He was not militant. The man voted Republican in every single election except one. And let me remind you that Franklin Roosevelt ran 4 times, right? His dream in life was to be vice president in a Republican administration. And if you think he didn't sell out the Windber miners in 1922, you're wrong. He did. But he wasn't alone in feeling that. John, and the point of being a business unionist is that you turn over to the company all control of production, anything to do with that end of things, any economics, any production, and you only concentrate on wages, hours, fringe benefits, conditions. That's it. Other progressive unionists want to maintain and expand a presence on the shop floor, and people were losing that. But miners were still craft workers. I know they're rural and they're underground, but they own their own tools. They are not bossed. In Pennsylvania, a foreman only had to visit once a week, and they never did that. You had to go find the foreman and drag him to your workplace and explain to him what the conditions were and negotiate with him. And one of the main rules of mining was never let the foreman see you work. He has no right to see you work. You talk, he's there to support you. That's different. But that was being threatened by the introduction of mechanization, which, and the goal of that was to turn the mine into a factory. And people said that quite openly. We're going to turn the mines into a factory. We're going to get rid of these crazy independent miners who think that they can decide when they're going to work, how they're going to do it, and they're going to try to boss us around. They're going to become followers after machines. And so you can see, there's a tension there in the mining industry, but in other industries as well. So, cutting out a few things, in 1921, John Brophy became the chairman of the UMWA Nationalization Research Committee. At the national conventions every year, rank and file miners voted overwhelmingly to push politically for nationalization of the mines. John L. Lewis was not interested in this at all, but he was forced to establish this committee, and he appointed Brophy as chair and 2 other sort of progressive mind district presidents as committee members. Now, I really can't figure out why he did that. It was a stupid thing to do, right? He didn't want nationalization. I think he thought that committees is where ideas go to die. And that he would put Brophy and Clint Golden and William Mitch in charge, not Clint Golden, Chris Golden, in charge, and they wouldn't be able to come up with anything, and then they'd have to shut up. And it would kind of go away. Well, that's not what happened. Because Brophy, because of his interest in education, he had made connections with several organizations that had come out of really the Red Scare after World War I. One of those was the ACLU, but others included the Bureau of Industrial Research, the League of Industrial Democracy, and the Workers' Education Bureau. Those were all located in New York. And he went there frequently. He worked with helping set up Brookwood Labor College, which is in upstate New York. And he set up a program in District 2 where anyone who went to the classes, the education classes, could apply to go to Brookwood. And if they were selected, and they selected 1 a year, they were fully funded at Brookwood Labor College. So in addition to those classes, they had citizenship classes, they had English language classes, and they just did whatever they could to try to help workers position themselves to be able to participate more as citizens. So now he's head of the Nationalization Committee. He gets the Bureau of Industrial Research to agree to do all the legwork and get all the data. They work for 2 years together, and they come up with a very comprehensive plan for the government to purchase all the coal lands in the U.S. for the price of somewhere between $1.5 and $2 billion, and then to run them in a set of districts that would be a tripartite union, engineers, and management, and the public, representatives of the public, okay? Mining engineers, union members, and representatives of the public. Yeah, I feel like I have an echo when I do this, but okay. So they then published about a 45-page pamphlet called How to Run Coal. They took it to John Lewis, and he said, I'm not interested. He would not allow the United Mine Workers Journal to publish it. He wouldn't allow any information about it at the annual conference. And so Brophy, then began a different type of program of education to try to educate miners and other workers and the public outside of the purview of the United Mine Workers. Now, there were some district newspapers, like in Illinois, they published it. He cut it down to about a 10-page pamphlet. The Survey, which became the Survey Graphic, which is kind of like the Atlantic today, published it in full and promoted it. There were a number of labor newspapers that published it. And so the word was kind of getting out. And this was, of course, added to these classes that they were having. He also brought a fellow named, oh my goodness, am I going to forget? I'll think of it in a minute. McAllister Coleman from the Bureau of Industrial Research to live in District 2 for 2 years, to go underground, work with the miners, and try to figure out if it would be possible to mechanize, which of course is going to come, without losing the miners' freedom, that kind of independent craftsmanship. And actually, Carter Goodrich comes up with a plan where you would have a team that worked. The team would be paid, and the team would decide how the work was going to proceed. So that became part of what then went into huge open shop drive. And it happens in the district as well. And now we've got people who are working maybe 5 or 6 days a month. That's all they're working. And so they close mines, operators close mines, and they won't let people accrue debt at the company store. They start kicking them out of company housing. It's getting really bad, but they have signs up that says, as soon as we get enough miners who will agree to the 1917 $5 scale, we will reopen the mines. And we will keep all other parts of the union contract, except the wage scale. You'll still have your check weighman. You'll still have all this stuff. This starts to break the union, as you can imagine. The other thing that's going on is that people are saying, why are we in this mess? Why don't we have work? And the operators plug into a group that has really grown over the last couple of years, the KKK, who say it's these immigrants who are coming in here taking your jobs. And they're Catholic. And they're having billions of Catholic babies. And they are not only going to take your children's jobs, but they're going to grow up and vote and take over this country. And then we're going to lose our democracy because they're papists. And they aren't going to respect America. And people are buying this because there's a teeny bit of, well, you're right, there's a lot of immigrants. So maybe this is the Pope's plan. How do we know? So, you know, the place is falling apart. Brophy really doesn't feel he can say much because he's Catholic. The union has said in 1923 that you can't be a member of the Klan and be a United Mine Worker. If you are a member of the Klan, you lose your membership in the United Mine Workers. But if you enforce that in District 2, Brophy felt like you wouldn't have, and that would break the union right there. Certainly not all white Protestant miners were in the Klan, but enough were that it was really starting to be a serious problem, causing a lot of fracturing. So in 1924, and the other thing I have to mention in 1924, the guy who's running for president, one of the guys who's running for president, is Robert La Follette from Wisconsin. He's running on the Progressive Party. He's for nationalization. He's for full unionization. He's for ending restrictive labor laws. And he's for ending labor injunctions. And he is a good candidate for workers. And Brophy wants to advertise that because, of course, companies are accusing him, they're red baiting, right? They're accusing him of being a communist. So in the spring of 1924, when things really are starting to fall apart, District 2 gives John Brophy permission to start an education department. This is funded through some New York organization, one, the Garland Fund. This guy, Charles Garland, inherited millions of dollars and said he didn't deserve it because he hadn't earned it. And so he created a fund where he gave this money to workers' organizations who had innovative ideas. So Brophy, he got some money in the 22 strike and he, raised his hand again. There was a woman there, a philanthropist named Evelyn Preston. She also funded the program. And that enabled Brophy to hire an out-of-work miner and Methodist Episcopal minister whose name was Paul Fuller and who was extremely eloquent and very dedicated to the cause of workers. So they began increased number of classes, an effort to have classes. They first targeted the Broad Top region, which is in Huntingdon County, because the unions were breaking there, and they were really concerned. So Paul Fuller went over and started classes in 7 different communities. Every day he went, because they were weekly classes. teaching them about nationalization and the economics of nationalization. And they loved it. Most of them were out of work. And so again, they didn't have a lot to do. So they loved reading, coming to these classes, men and women, and debating and then talking about it for the rest of the week, right? And reading some more. So, but things were still tough there. And Fuller said, look, these people are so depressed. They're so poor, they're hungry, they're depressed, they don't know how this is going to end. And so they came up with the idea to have labor Chautauquas. And this idea comes out of course, Chautauqua, New York, but there were traveling Chautauquas that came out of Chautauqua, New York, usually 3 to 5 days, and they came through a lot of the towns in this area. Nancy Glow had one every year, and they would raise the money to get the Chautauqua to come and then sell tickets and hopefully make back their money plus a little more, so maybe the next year or 2 years they could have 4 days instead of 3. And they loved it because it's national speakers. Also, you know, they're more expensive for the better speakers, right? National speakers, entertainment, but they hadn't had this now for a few years. He said, well, let's do labor Chautauquas. We can do this. So they did. They kind of figured out how to do it. And they had national level speakers, state level speakers and national level speakers who came and talked about serious things like economics, labor parties, nationalization, all of these deep topics. They made sure that they had classes in these communities before they had these Chautauquas, so that people were already grounded. Chautauquas were then open to everyone in the community and in the nearby areas. So it drew in farmers and storekeepers and other people who they could also explain how we're all in this together. If we make better wages, we can buy more food from the farmers, we can spend more in your store. It's to your advantage for us all to stick together as a community. Otherwise, the money is just going straight out of this community. So they had these speakers coming in. They usually did 7 days. They started with a big parade. I think pretty much everybody in the town was in the parade, and you'd kind of start and then you'd run back so you could watch later. I don't know. It seemed like everybody was in there. But every team, every band, every chorus, everything, every baseball team, everybody was in the parade at the beginning and at the end. And then in the evenings, they would have entertainment, local entertainment. The 6-year-old Kowalczyk boxing twins were a fan favorite. And little Sally, who could sing while her aunt played the piano. And, this was the type of thing they had. They could celebrate their local talent. They also had a junior Chautauqua, which I think was absolutely brilliant. Kept the kids interested and going through the day. They had this woman, Clara Johnson, who was from Sagamore. She was called the fighting teacher from Sagamore. And she ran the junior Chautauquas. And here are the kinds of things they did. They had lots of crafts. They rewrote fairy tales and fables and songs to make workers the heroes. And then they put on plays out of these fairy tales and fables at the end for the adults. And they had a choir that sang a lot of these rewritten songs that they had rewritten themselves. And the point was to teach them about, how the working class built and maintained the country, and to give them pride in who they were. And to give them, a way to counter what their teachers were probably saying to them. So the first one of these was held in 6 Mile Run, and the main speaker who came was a guy named Harry Laidler. He was the director of the League for Industrial Democracy. I don't think he'd ever been out of New York City, at least not significantly. And so he gets off the train in Huntingdon, somebody picks him up in a rattle-trap car, and they start out on these, dirt roads, right? They aren't really roads. And they're going up and down in the mountains. And Harry Laidler says he was pretty sure he was never going to see civilization again. That, he didn't know where he was going, but it was not going to be someplace he could come back from. And so then he gets out in this extremely remote place, and he's here. He's been told he's supposed to talk about nationalization, and he's going to talk to classes and give lectures, and he's going, oh my gosh, what am I going to tell these people? They don't know anything. But when he gets back home to New York, he writes an article that he publishes in the newspaper, and I believe it's in the survey as well, talking about how wrong he was about these people, talking about their intellectual prowess. These people understood and could discuss extremely complex economic, philosophical, and political theory. They were amazing. And it really changed his mind about the working class. And so he became a big proponent of education. Give these people a chance. Give them a chance to read, right? Don't keep this away from them. He was absolutely amazed. He said they asked questions that were so incredibly insightful and important. And so they went on then to have another, I think, 16 of these Chautauquas. And out of these Chautauquas, they built even more classes, and they also created a lot of Lafayette clubs, and people became very interested politically. And so it really was a success. By 1926, though, Brophy had decided that the only way the United Micro Workers was going to survive is if they had a change of leadership, and he decided to challenge Lewis for the presidency, which he did, and he won, but Lewis counted the votes. And we know he won. The evidence is clear. He knew he won. And he didn't really know what to do. Some people said you need to sue Lewis. He didn't want to do that. He didn't want to discredit the union. So he decided he would just continue to talk about what he called the miners program in a platform called Save Our Union. That he would continue to talk about that. He was now no longer president of the district. He didn't even have a job. And so he was pretty free to go around the country and present this material to everyone. And the miners program was nationalization of the mines, full unionization, a labor party, a 30-hour work week, 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, which was to share the work equally. And he went promoting that and was building up his candidacy to run again in 1928 against Lewis, when Lewis declared the Save Our Union movement a dual union and expelled him from the United Mine Workers. At that point, Brophy was living in Pittsburgh with his wife's family, and he decided that what he would do is to try to start a labor college in Pittsburgh. So he contacted 3 friendly Pittsburgh professors, University of Pittsburgh professors, who agreed to teach in the labor college. They talked to the University of Pittsburgh and got them to agree to let them have the free use of some rooms on campus. And so they began this labor college, small, but it was growing. However, of course, operators and others didn't like that. And so they went to the chancellor of the University of Pittsburgh and said, we're not going to give you any money. And so it ended up with the 3 faculty being run out of the university and having to leave and go somewhere else. and Brophy, of course, being denied use of the rooms. And at that point, that labor college collapsed after only a couple of years. But happily, and again, I don't know why, we get to the 30s, the CIO comes along, led by none other than John L. Lewis, who decides that as first director of the CIO, he wants John Brophy. So he looks him up, dusts him off, and puts him in charge of, as the first director of the CIO, he's in charge of SWOC, Steelworkers Organizing Committee, and he's able really to stay and work in labor for the rest of his life. But he always maintained such a confidence and dedication to teaching the working class everything so that they could be the leaders not only of their communities but of their nation and the world. And he so believed in that. And I'll end by saying what my husband always used to say whenever he ended a talk, which was, continue your good work.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Well, now, I believe that was a bit of an education for everybody. My wife and I one time went to Hastings, Pennsylvania. I guess it had been about a month or so beforehand. There was a dedication of a marker in Rossiter, PA, where they had a labor chautauqua, and we dedicated a marker up there, a Pennsylvania historical marker about the labor chautauqua in Rossiter, PA. Jimmy Wada, Billy Elizabeth was there, a bunch of us, and then we went to the next one they held where we put another marker in was in Hastings, Pennsylvania. No, Hastings isn't a very big town, but I take a pleasure in telling you that this is where my wife's family was from Hastings, Pennsylvania. This is where my mother's family was from. We're sitting on the banks of the stream down in Hastings, Pennsylvania, looking at the program for the day, and guess whose names are in there? My grandfather's and her grandfathers were at the labor chautauqua in Hastings, Pennsylvania, and they were active participants in it. So, our marriage was made in a labor chautauqua. So, yes, sir.
There's a historical marker in Nantiglow too for John Brophy.
Yes.
He lived in Nantiglow for a while, and it's right in the Mine Workers Park.
George Wallen is the president of the local union in Nantiglow, Pennsylvania, which happens to also to be my home local union. And that's where John Brophy was from. I say that I said this earlier on, that John Brophy was a hero of mine. I think you understand why now. I think that he spoke and acted in the behalf of workers in the best interest of workers for all of his working life. And I admire the man.